Dennis Newgar. The joint session will come to order. And thank you. Leading us in prayer today is Pastor David Zelmer from Lutheran Memorial Church in Detroit.
Let us pray. O God of all creation, we give thanks for the gift of the law and for those who work to bring justice and mercy to all the people of South Dakota. We remember those who go in harm's way on our behalf to keep us safe by night and day, for those who govern, for those who craft the laws, and for those who apply them. We ask for wisdom, courage, and the will to persevere for our Supreme Court justices, our Circuit Court judges, our governor and legislators, and all those who hold elected or appointed office. On this day, we give thanks for the gift of healing that has come to Chief Justice David Gilbert. And we continue to lift up in prayer all those who continue to need your gentle healing touch. Bless this legislative session, that the words of the prophet Amos might be fulfilled. I take no delight in your solemn assemblies. Take away from me the noise of your songs. I will not listen to the melody of your harps, but let justice roll down like waters, and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream. In your holy name we pray. Amen.
Amen. The Secretary of the Senate will call the roll of the Senate.
Madonna Esteem, the part of the roll, the three of the part of the Senate, be appointed to escort the Honorable David Gilbert, Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, to the roster.
Is there a second? Aye. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed nay. Motion carried.
The President appoints to such committee Senator Bowe, Schoenbeck, and Moore, and Representatives Roden, Dykstra, Harkins, and Gillespie as a committee of four on the part of the House.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Ladies and gentlemen, Chief Justice David Gilbertson is a native of Sisseton and received his undergraduate degree from the University of South Dakota in 1972 and his Juris Doctorate from the University of South Dakota, from South Dakota State in 1972. And no mistake, his Juris Doctor from the University of South Dakota School of Law in 1975. He was engaged in private practice for 11 years, and during this time he also served as Roberts County State's Attorney and as City Attorney for the City of Sisseton. He was appointed to the Circuit Court bench in 1986. After nearly a decade of service on the Circuit Court bench, Chief Justice Gilbertson was appointed to the Supreme Court in April of 1995 to represent the 5th Supreme Court District. He was retained by the voters in the 1998 general election, and in September of 2001, Justice Gilbertson was elected Chief Justice by his fellow members of the Supreme Court. Born October 29, 1949, Chief Justice Gilbertson and his wife, Deborah, have 4 children. He's past president of the South Dakota Judges Association and a member of the Glacial Lakes Bar Association, the Brown County Bar Association, and the South Dakota Bar Association. Will the Sergeant at Arms please announce the arrival of the Chief Justice?
Lieutenant Governor and members of the legislature, the Chief Justice of the South Dakota Supreme Court, the Honorable David Gilbertson.
Reverend Zomer, thank you for that wonderful prayer. Dear Governor Rounds, Lieutenant Governor Dugard, members of the legislature, constitutional officers, my fellow justices, circuit court judges, and most especially, all citizens of the state of South Dakota. As I begin my second term as Chief Justice of the South Dakota Supreme Court, it is my pleasure to bring you once again both an oral and a written report on the state of the South Dakota Judiciary. I am pleased to report to you that the unified judicial system, which has just completed its 30th year, is strong and working well to meet the challenges it faces. Since the creation of South Dakota as a state in 1889, our state motto has been, "Under God, people rule." We have done so under the state's Constitution. Although much of the Constitution remains the same as when it was originally drafted in 1889, from time to time the people have seen fit to change or update significant portions of it. It is not simply a dry, ancient document, but rather a well-traveled map to guide us on how to organize our society and maintain it while recognizing the rights and the dignity of the individual. There are comments from time to time about federal court decisions interpreting the United States Constitution. In reality, the United States Constitution is a base or a beginning of individual rights. Each state is free to grant more rights or more protections to its citizens under its state constitution than are granted in the federal Constitution. As an example, in 2005, the United States Supreme Court issued an opinion expanding the scope of eminent domain by a state to allow condemnation of private land that could ultimately wind up in the private hands of others rather than the original owner or the public. In that case, the United States Supreme Court also noted that the states were free to interpret their state constitutions in a more restricted manner so as to offer greater rights and protections to its citizens than those afforded under the federal Constitution. The South Dakota Supreme Court has done so repeatedly since the question of public use of private lands first came before us nearly 100 years ago. We have interpreted the South Dakota Constitution to require that no land may be taken by eminent domain unless it is for the actual use by the public. Thus, our state constitution provides more protection for private ownership of land against the threat of condemnation than does the federal Constitution. Our state constitution also serves another valuable purpose. The federal government does not define our property rights. Each state, through its legislative and constitutional process, determines the property rights of its citizens. The South Dakota Supreme Court is called upon to interpret our state's constitution. We, as a court, are not a continual constitutional convention in progress. We merely interpret the text that has previously been approved by this legislature and ultimately our citizens. In the same vein, we are aware that the constitutional authority to pass legislation rests with the legislature. The role of the Supreme Court is limited to interpreting the meaning or the intent of that legislation. This year, we mark the 30th anniversary of the unified judicial system in this state. Those who are old enough to remember the previous judicial system in South Dakota are well aware of the chaotic existence of separate judicial systems that existed and attempted to run, for the most part, independently of each other. It was as each committee of this legislature attempted to conduct its business independently, and the legislature as a unified body had no authority to put each committee proposal into an organized set of laws or a unified state budget. 30 years ago, an amendment to our state constitution combined the patchwork judicial system into a single system under the direction and the supervision of the South Dakota Supreme Court. While the Supreme Court is probably most well known for its appellate opinions, it takes with equal seriousness its constitutional obligation to run the people's judicial system in the best possible manner. To borrow a phrase from President Truman, the buck stops here. I wish to thank Justices Sabers, Conenkamp, Zinner, and Meyer-Henry for their dedicated efforts to that end. Since 1975, the court has held a fall term of court outside of its courtroom in Pier. This past year, the court held its October term of court at Northern State University in Aberdeen. Each day, almost 500 high school, and college students and members of the public attended our oral arguments. Others who were not able to attend in person were able to listen to the arguments on our live internet broadcast. The proceedings were also widely covered by the media. We would like to thank President Schloss and the faculty and the students of Northern for their gracious hospitality. In the past year, we experienced a slight decline in the caseload of the Supreme Court. However, the reduction in numbers was matched by the increasingly complex issues contained in these cases. In the circuit courts, the case filings remained mostly constant compared with previous years. Statewide, there was no significant trends up or down from the current caseload. However, in those counties that are experiencing rapid increases in population, there appears to be an ever-increasing caseload in both criminal and civil dockets. People generate litigation. More people generate more litigation. For the past several years, the unified judicial system has responded to the increasing demands placed upon it with basically the same number of employees. We accomplished this through the dedication and the hard work of 492 full-time personnel in the judicial system. We have sought additional FTEs for the unified judicial system only when we were convinced they were essential to our mission. The Supreme Court and the presiding judges are well aware of the fiscal challenges the state faces. For the upcoming year, we will be requesting a budget increase of only 2% in general funds appropriations and an overall budgetary increase of 1.7%, excluding salary policy and health insurance. This budget will allow us to continue to provide the people of this state with an effective judiciary. Even with the requested increase, the UJS budget represents only a little over 1% of the state's total budget. On the other hand, I would call to your attention the fact that the judiciary is an instrument of the state that provides revenue to other units of government. In the past fiscal year, we collected $22.3 million as compared to our general fund appropriation of $28.5 million. We returned the entire $22.3 million, with approximately $13.1 million of that going to the counties and school districts, $8.2 million to the state, and $1 million to the cities. Several years ago, I reported to you that when the justices and judges of South Dakota were polled, they unanimously answered that the disintegration of the family will have the greatest future impact on the South Dakota judiciary. If that question were asked again today, I have no doubt the answer would be the same, perhaps with more emphasis. Our foremost concern is the status of the children in these dysfunctional family units. As the writer of the Book of Proverbs observed 3,000 years ago, train up the child in the way he or she should go, and when they are old, they will not depart from it. The UJS attempts to work with wayward youth as well as their families to provide the supervision necessary to redirect their lives. There is a limit, however, to what we can do. We have individual court service officers, some of whom are called upon to supervise up to 150 probationers. With such a large caseload, the amount of time available to spend on each probationer is, unfortunately, not sufficient. Such an important task therefore requires the joint efforts of the courts, the schools, the churches, the civic organizations, and concerned citizens of South Dakota. Our intensive probation program, which carries a much more manageable caseload, continues to produce positive results. In many cases, we are able to take successful corrective action while leaving the probationer in the home instead of the more expensive option of institutionalization or incarceration. An experimental program is also in place that promises further positive results. In Charles Mix County, we have participated in a new program called Connecting Point that serves Native American children who have been found by the court to be in need of supervision. Rather than a placement with the Department of Corrections, the juvenile clients and their families are provided intensive community-based mental health services, educational and family support. They are provided with group and individual counseling, training in life skills, psychoeducational programs, educational tutoring, job training, and employment services. The good news is, as of June 30th, 2005, none of the 13 clients being served by this program had committed a violation serious enough to require a placement to DOC, and only 2 of the 13 had committed any violation at all. Avoiding placements to the Department of Corrections saves the state funds and allows juveniles to remain with their families and maintain their community and their cultural ties. The opportunity to rehabilitate children in need is a task with which we simply must succeed. We all like to proudly point to individuals from our town or our state that have become prominent. However, we must ask ourselves a hard question. Are we in South Dakota raising future presidents or future presidential assassins? The consequences of failure are just too high. Since the dawn of civilization, the vital conduit through which values and beliefs are passed from one generation to the next has been the family. Governments and empires rise and fall. Widely accepted scientific theories of the day, such as the world is flat or other ideas, are modified or debunked. Yet the family endures. Although our civilization has advanced in many areas, we have developed no successful alternative to the family structure. If the failure of the family is generated by the parents and they cannot be successfully rehabilitated, termination of parental rights is the final option. The children are often placed in foster homes during the time corrective action is attempted. Since 1997, the Unified Judicial System has had procedures in place that expedite the time involved in the termination of parental rights should it become necessary to speed up the adoption process and get abused and neglected children into quality adoptive homes. I once heard a speaker put it in terms of the eyes of a child who just finished the first grade. For a minute, think about it when you were that age. Upon release from first grade in May, you did not worry about school starting in September because in your eyes as a first grader, the summer was the same as forever. If a child of that age is undergoing abuse or is stuck in limbo because of an unresponsive system, that length of time is forever in the unfortunate child's eyes. Getting these children into quality, permanent homes is imperative. Every year, nationally 20,000 foster kids age out of the foster care system by reaching their 18th birthday. In 2 years, 60% of these former foster care kids are homeless, imprisoned, or dead. Another area of deep concern continues to be that of domestic violence. I'm still haunted by an incident of domestic violence which occurred early in my legal career. Late one Saturday night, I was called to the jail by the sheriff to draft a criminal complaint for aggravated assault. When I got there, the sheriff was in the process of removing a pair of scissors from the back of a man who had refused to go to the hospital. The victim looked at me and said, "I hate to get her in trouble, but this is the third time." On a national basis, if law enforcement is called to address a situation, there is a positive effect. In such situations, only 1 out of 4 perpetrators will be involved in further incidents. Further success is gained by moving these cases into the courts. However, we still have a long way to go. Nationally, in such instances, if the judge issues a protection order, 60% are violated within a year. This year, South Dakota saw an 8.6% increase in the issuance of domestic protection orders. We must also stress personal accountability. Obviously, we do not have enough jails or institutions to lock up all perpetrators. Judges who are called upon daily to make determinations as to who needs to be incarcerated and who can be successfully rehabilitated in non-institutional programs are necessary. As a circuit judge, I told those I put on felony probation that they were not merely being allowed to freely walk out of the courthouse door. Rather, they were being given the key to the penitentiary, which they would carry with them at all times. And it was their conduct, not somebody else's decision, which would determine whether that key to the penitentiary would be used in the future. When they left my courtroom, they knew the responsibility for whether or not that key to the penitentiary was used rested solely with them. Except in cases where the sentence is death or life imprisonment, This person will sooner or later be released to become part of our society. Obviously, we must assist those people to ensure as many as possible of those theoretical keys to the penitentiary door are never used, and as many offenders as possible are successfully rehabilitated. A few years ago, I told you that during my time as a circuit judge, nearly all felonies I encountered could be traced to alcohol abuse. The crime was either committed while the person was intoxicated or to get funds to get intoxicated. Times have changed. Although it is anecdotal, presiding Judge Glenn Severson of Sioux Falls has told me that he now believes that 75% of all of his adult felony cases he sees can be traced to addiction to methamphetamines. These cases are not limited to drug cases. They carry over into felony assault, bad checks, burglaries, theft of autos, and robberies. In visiting with veteran judges from Rapid City, they readily agree with this observation, declaring in their area the use of methamphetamines to be skyrocketing. Methamphetamine use is particularly a problem in South Dakota because it can be manufactured in the state with ingredients that are all too readily available. Compared with other illegal drugs, methamphetamine is relatively inexpensive to purchase, making it more readily available to a wider range of victims. In 1998, rural areas nationwide reported 949 meth labs. Only 5 years later, in 2003, that number had increased astronomically by tenfold to 9,385. This is one area where free enterprise has no place and should not be tolerated. From 1995 to 2002, the number of South Dakotans using methamphetamines increased by over 33%. South Dakota's rate of persons using this drug was double that of Denver or Los Angeles. This state's rate of use of methamphetamines was 6 times higher than the rates in Dallas, Atlanta, Detroit, Philadelphia, Baltimore, and Miami. We have a problem. If what brings people into the criminal system to begin with is the addiction to alcohol or drugs, then those addictions must be successfully addressed, or the repetition of crimes is a virtual certainty. The victims and financial losses from these crimes will continue to mount. In visiting with judges and those who are experts in the area of drug abuse, it is clear that traditional forms of punishment and rehabilitation may not be effective. The devastation of methamphetamines is not limited to the abuser. Meth babies are being seen with increased regularity in our courts. Not only do we have a dysfunctional parent who probably will have his or her parental rights terminated, but the state is now faced with caring for a child who suffers the numerous, often permanent ills caused by the mother's meth abuse during pregnancy. Loving foster or adoptive homes can only go so far in dealing with and overcoming the effects of this abuse on the abuser's children. As a court system, we are charged with looking out for the best interest of the children who come into our system. It is unfortunately too late for many of these meth babies after they are born. Not only do they suffer the effects of methamphetamines from their mother, but the mother often avoids necessary prenatal care for fear her addiction will be discovered. Keeping mothers off methamphetamines during pregnancy is imperative. The negative effects of a drug-addicted parent continue after the child's birth. Nationally, approximately 10% of all children live with at least one parent who abuses alcohol or other drugs. Also nationally, between 1/3 and 2/3 of child maltreatment cases involve substance abuse. In 2005, there were 110 children in foster care in South Dakota due to parental involvement with meth. In cases before the South Dakota Supreme Court concerning termination of parental rights, I believe that drug and alcohol abuse is at the core of over 90% of these cases. One of the ways the unified judicial system is addressing the meth problem in South Dakota is by attempting to implement a pilot drug program in the near future in the northern Black Hills of the 4th Judicial Circuit. We are hopeful that by focusing additional resources and attention in this area, we can assist our citizens in decreasing meth use and its devastating effects on our state. This is the first attempt by the UJS of dealing directly with the meth problem within the judicial system. Only time will tell if it is successful. However, the greatest folly would be simply to do nothing as the problem continues to expand. Jack Ellenbecker, our Director of Budget and Finance, retired after 33 years of service to the UJS. I know many of you in this legislative body work with Jack on financial matters. He provided necessary budgetary guidance and planning to ensure the UJS operated consistently in a proper fiscal manner, and we wish him well in the future. This year, two of our veteran circuit judges, Judge Boyd McMurchy and Judge Tim Johns, retired. Both had 30 years of judicial service to the people of South Dakota. They were with the UJS in its infancy and have been major contributing factors to its success. I thank them and Jack for their many years of service and wish them well in their future plans. Continuity is important. A key factor in judicial decision-making is the experience the judges acquire on the bench over their years of service. Difficult legal questions arise that may call for painstaking hours of legal research in the law books. However, an even more difficult issue is the same one that was faced by King Solomon in the Bible in determining who should get custody of the child. In such an instance, a judge does not get the luxury of simply going to the law book or a checklist for an easy or an automatic answer. The judge is all too often presented with the difficult decision of having to decide custody between two parents, either both saints or both sinners. The rare exception seems to be the easy call, where there is one saint and one sinner. In a close call concerning the issue of custody, the best interests of the child may oftentimes be guided by the years of judicial experience the judges gained on the bench. The same rationale applies to criminal sentences. For a moment, think back to your youth. Who among us who violated a rule of our household, while obviously not thrilled with our short-term prospects, would wanted our parents to consult a punishment table to determine our fate? There would be no chance to plead your case or hopefully bring up mitigating circumstances. If we are sentenced by a sentencing table rather than by judicial experience, the sentence is by definition either too hard or too soft. The punishment does not fit the crime or the criminal. In each of your counties, you have a building that's named called the courthouse. In a way, this name is a misnomer. It is not owned by the court. It's owned by the people of South Dakota, who direct through their constitution that the court system use it to resolve their disputes in an orderly and a timely manner. Many of our courthouses have inscription in stone or murals depicting the concept of equal justice under law. The challenge is to take those stone inscriptions and murals and breathe life into them so they become a reality. Since 2001, the Unified Judicial System has provided data and other assistance to a research project conducted by the Political Science Department of the University of South Dakota. The study was in effect to determine whether there were disparities in sentencing and incarceration of Native Americans in this state, and if so, the reason for them. Based on a review of actual court files, the study concluded that any disparities are based on poverty and socioeconomic factors, not racism. While this offers comfort in that we as a judicial system are putting forth a good faith effort of judicial equality, there is clearly cause for concern that socioeconomic factors determine to some degree the likelihood the person will be incarcerated and how much time will be served. Although admittedly anecdotal, it is my personal experience that poverty, alcohol abuse, and drug addiction are the three main culprits in an ever-increasing penitentiary population. To put it another way, sober people with good jobs and supportive families commit few serious crimes. As a consequence of our concern that all people be treated equally in our criminal justice system, the Supreme Court created an Equal Justice Commission. The Equal Justice Commission held hearings at various locations throughout South Dakota, including 7 Indian reservations and several cities, to listen to the various concerns of those who had grievances or complaints about the treatment in the system. It also visited the penitentiaries and obtained input from a number of inmates. It received numerous letters and written testimonials from South Dakota citizens dealing with the subject of fair treatment for minorities. It further heard from South Dakota Attorney General Larry Long and Secretary of Public Safety Thomas Draven. A representative of the Board of Pardons and Paroles also provided information to the Commission. All told, the Commission heard from hundreds of South Dakota citizens. The Commission was composed of judges, lawyers, and laypersons, all with varying backgrounds, cultural heritages, and walks of life. I would like to thank those dedicated individuals who have served on this Commission. In the next month, the Commission will make recommendations to the Supreme Court as to how the unified judicial system can provide the utmost fairness to all people throughout the entire judicial process. That report will be filed with the court, and we will be studying it with the goal of implementing its recommendations. The report will probably give us some reasons to work for improvement, and hopefully also encourages us that, by and large, justice is fair and even-handed in South Dakota. The courtrooms of this state dot the landscape from border to border. Disruptions in the past have either befallen a specific locale, such as a fire or a tornado, or a statewide, such as our recent Thanksgiving weekend blizzard of 2005. They've been temporary. In either event, although somewhat disruptive, the UJS was up and running again within a reasonably short period of time. This year, however, we were presented with the possibility that the forces of nature or man would release damage so horrific that the legal system would be unable to operate for an extended period of time. One need only look at the devastating effects of Hurricane Katrina upon the legal system of Louisiana to realize that this type of risk, while probably not great, is nevertheless a risk that would render our legal system inoperable for a significant period of time. Louisiana's legal system is basically being forced to start over. Obviously, we are not a potential victim of a hurricane in South Dakota, but that should not allow us to become complacent to forces that could potentially overwhelm us. I wish those states who have sustained significant damage to their legal systems all the best in restoring them so that they might once again function to serve the public. Before I conclude, I would like to take a moment of personal privilege to mention two matters, one humorous and one serious. I realize that my annual address to this legislature is a public event that will be covered by the press. During last year's State of the Judiciary address, I was photographed flanked by Governor Rounds and Lieutenant Governor Dugard. The photo of the eagle's wings on the mural behind me appeared to be attached to my shoulders. And in case I had forgotten it, either the speaker or the lieutenant governor, when I came up here, was kind enough to leave a copy of the picture on the podium. Nobody will own up to it. Attorney General mounted investigation. This photo prompted one South Dakota citizen, unnamed, to send a photograph of Jay Leno on the Tonight Show. Mr. Leno showed the photograph on national television, and the photo should have either been lined up differently, or in the alternative, he said, "This judge can fly." Let me assure you, I'm well aware that I'm not Superman, and I cannot fly. Numerous others would willingly attest to both. I've also been repeatedly reminded by my father, who has been a minister for 56 years, that I'm falling far short of becoming an angel. On a more serious note, a few months later I faced the diagnosis of prostate cancer. Surgery was successful and I'm now cancer-free. I would like to thank my wife Deborah and my family, my colleagues on the court, Governor Rounds, the members of the executive branch, and the legislators, as well as the citizens of South Dakota for all their kind support, their prayers, and assistance during my diagnosis, treatment, and recovery. I would also urge all men of this state who are over 40 to have the PSA blood test, which led to the discovery of my cancer. This simple, quick test can save your life. A government in which we each have a stake and that values all rights of all equally is internally secure. We currently face threats from a group of self-appointed foreign terrorists who have sworn to destroy us in our way of life. One of our public officials addressed the ultimate result of this type of challenge. He said, "At what point shall we expect the approach of danger? By what means shall we fortify against it? Shall we expect some transatlantic military giant to step over the ocean and crush us at a blow? Never. All the armies of Europe, Asia, and Africa combined, with all the treasure of the earth, could not by force take a drink from our rivers or set foot on our hills. If destruction is to be our lot, we must be ourselves its author and its finisher. As a nation of free people, we must either live through all time or die by suicide." This was not a present-day leader attempting to assess our current situation, but rather Abraham Lincoln speaking in the early 1860s. If we can continue to adhere to our constitutional principles, including equal justice under the law, we cannot be overcome. The UJS has done its best during the past 30 years to provide the citizens of this state with a judiciary that is timely and responsive in carrying out its constitutional and statutory tasks. Hopefully, we can say the best is yet to come. Thank you very much.
Senator Bowles moves that the joint session be dissolved.
Is there a second? Motion is to dissolve. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Joint session is dissolved.
That one I'm still working on. So because of the road and told me that we have to really make sure that we cross our T's and dot our I's. Next time I'll do 2 big ones.
Okay.